Hi everyone. If you can see the clock behind me, it's 11:25 right now. And at noon, I'm doing an interview with an advocate group that is startswithyouth.com. And they reached out to me and asked me to do an interview because of my TEDx talk. Now, if you've seen my TEDx talk, then you know that it has to do with abuse I actually endured as a child and how I sort of paved the journey to begin to become whole again. It didn't happen overnight, and it certainly wasn't something that happened within a couple years. If you've suffered from abuse of that kind, it hits you physically, emotionally, and mentally in ways you're not even aware of. What's interesting, though, is had somebody told me a year and a half ago that I was going to go on a world stage and I was going to talk about that very dark secret that really only a few people in my immediate fold were aware of, I would have thought they were crazy. You see, when the TEDx Flower Mound was announced, I was on a high. My book had just been published. I was helping people left and right. I was hearing feedback from them on how them using the principles was supporting them and their companies. And I thought, okay, I'm supposed to do this TEDx talk because if you've listened to anything I ever talk about, I take very intentional time in the mornings. And during that time, it was made clear to me. It's like, okay, I'm doing this talk. So months go by, the time comes near to turn in your audition. And I'm excited. I'm thinking this is going to have something to do with my business platform. I'm going to talk on leadership. I'm going to talk on culture, communication, one of these things that have been conveyed to me to be some of my superpowers, if you will. And so I sat there in silence, an open vessel. I'm ready. What is it that we're talking about? And as I sat there, open and ready to receive, I felt this weight just come over me. And I was, oh no, not that. I was over 40 years old, had managed to not share this with the world. And now I was being asked by my Lord, my God, to share this with the world on a TEDx stage. Now, I'm not saying these things to go down a religious hole. For anyone who believes this is a religious talk, it's not. It's to simply convey that if you truly believe in a higher being, and for me, it's my God, to be obedient is not something that you question. You really try to serve. And trying to write out that TEDx talk takes you back. You know, the interesting thing, I learned this when I was going through my life coach accreditation. If we recall a positive memory, we sort of see it third person in front of us and watch it happen. But if we recall a traumatic or negative memory, our bodies and minds have a way of stepping back into it. You feel it, you can see it. And when you're talking about something as dark as sex abuse, it's not something you want to step back into and remember. So writing it and then tweaking it and then memorizing it and then having to elaborate on it was a process that took me probably close to 6 months, 6 to 8 months total before I actually stepped on that stage. And truth be told, stepping on that stage, being in front of people is not a big deal to me. Clearly, I'm a speaker. But being in front of people to share this part of my history, my past, was almost felt like stepping on a stage completely naked and vulnerable, nothing to protect me. But I was obedient. So, clearly there was a sense of disappointment that I was doing this. It was to serve others. It's what the whole point of TEDx is, right? Is an idea worth sharing. And there are so many people in this world, so many people in this world who've gone through this type of abuse, and they live their lives not ever healing from it. So if I could serve even one person, then being vulnerable enough to share my story and my journey was going to make it worth it. What's happened since then is the comments, the private messages I get. People seek me out and find me in different platforms. These are people in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are just now realizing the long-term impact that not working through that trauma has had in their life. Abusive relationships as adults, lack of self-worth. I could continue to go on because it really, when you're violated in that way, it robs you of so much that until you take an opportunity to determine what that is, it will continue to rob you, which in essence keeps you captive by what somebody else chose to do. when you were a child. So I continue to serve, I continue to answer. It's why I'm doing this interview today. And, you know, I had thought that it really didn't have an impact professionally for me, that these were two different people. There's me on this part who's helping to serve others in this way of obedience and sharing my past, my story, my journey. And then there's this piece of me that's professional and that serves businesses and executives and leaders. And I had this realization when I was working with Christy, who's a dear friend of mine, that I really am one person. And as much as I would try to keep these separate, ultimately, it's all one being. I can't be one or the other. I'm both. But what also came from that was realizing that abuse as a child that I endured for over 6 years, and being able to navigate moving beyond that, through that, and really heal from it, makes me an incredibly unique leader, because I lead from a place of my history. So the compassion, the ability to address incredibly difficult conflict without having to get personally emotional or angry, for lack of a better word. I'm able to teach people how to navigate conflict in that way. I'm able to teach people how to communicate in a way that the audience receives it how they hear it, not just how we naturally speak. There's a lot of, because I'm such a servant leader, that really plays into how I form the type of leader that I am. So if you have a need, or you know someone in the need to work through such trauma, I will be sharing the link to their website where there's different testimonials and interviews with different people who've suffered different kinds of abuse, right? It's not just sexual. There's physical abuse. There's emotional abuse. And abuse of any kind is traumatic. But I hope me sharing this with you kind of shares with you as well that sometimes we're called to do things not really knowing why we're called to do it. But as I said in a video before, when that opportunity comes that you're called to serve, because not serving to me is selfish. Guys, take care, and I better go finish prepping to chat with Dana.